The anatomy of the choke point, environmental determinism, maritime fortification, and the biological imperative of the gate. Chapter 4, Fortification, the Iron Sentinels. Act 3, the synthesis. To truly recognize that the aggressive militarization of geographic choke points is a universal human behavior driven by strict environmental determinism, we must hold a historical mirror directly up to the modern conflict in the Persian Gulf. We need look no further than the ancient Mediterranean Sea, another deeply enclosed body of water entirely defined by its own strategic bottlenecks and narrow passages. Here, over 2 millennia ago, we see the exact same repetitive patterns of human territorial behavior, the exact same desperate application of high technology to control maritime access, and the exact same fundamental drive to forcefully anchor terrestrial power against the unyielding fluidity of the ocean. The names and the technologies have changed, but the environmental pressures dictating the behavior remain absolutely identical. The most striking, perfectly aligned historical parallel to the modern defense of the Strait of Hormuz is the legendary Siege of Syracuse, a brutal conflict which took place between 213 and 212 before the Common Era. Syracuse, prominently located on the eastern coast of the island of Sicily, was the absolute strategic linchpin of the central Mediterranean, commanding the highly vital, lucrative sea lanes running directly between the Italian peninsula and the coast of North Africa. When the expanding Roman Republic purposefully dispatched a massive amphibious army under the direct command of Consul Marcus Claudius Marcellus to capture the wealthy city, they were met not merely with passive stone walls, but with an incredibly integrated, high-technology coastal defense system meticulously designed by the legendary geometrician and engineer Archimedes. Much like the modern Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps carefully utilizing advanced cruise missiles to deter the technologically superior United States Navy, Archimedes intelligently employed a highly sophisticated, interlocking array of calibrated artillery to project a lethal, overlapping zone of denial over the coastal waters of Sicily. Detailed historical accounts, meticulously recorded by ancient historians such as Polybius and Livy, describe exactly how Archimedes modified the city's massive sea walls with specific, mathematically calculated apertures and loopholes. These modifications explicitly allowed heavy catapults, powerful mangonels, and rapid-firing antipersonnel scorpions to maintain a constant, withering bombardment of the approaching Roman quinquiremes. These ancient, tension-powered engines of war were the precise equivalent of the ballistic missiles of their era. A highly engineered, heavy catapult was fully capable of launching a massive 670-pound stone boulder completely across the water, carrying enough raw kinetic energy to punch entirely through the reinforced upper decks of a Roman warship and send it immediately to the bottom of the sea. Yet the absolute most terrifying, psychologically devastating component of the Syracusan defense was a mechanical engineering marvel famously known as the claw of Archimedes, or the iron hand. This highly innovative device functioned as an ancient, highly effective mechanical countermeasure to amphibious assault. Massive, pivoting wooden beams equipped with heavy iron grapnels attached to thick chains would violently swing out from the elevated battlements, drop precisely onto the wooden prows of approaching Roman ships, and utilize a complex, geometrically perfect system of pulleys and heavy counterweights to physically lift the massive vessels entirely out of the water. The trapped ships would then be violently dropped or aggressively capsized, sending their heavily armored, drowning legionnaires to a horrific, watery grave. The psychological terror inflicted upon the Roman fleet by these highly visible mechanical defenses was absolute. Historians record that eventually, the mere sight of a simple wooden stick protruding from the walls of Syracuse was enough to send battle-hardened Roman soldiers fleeing in absolute panic, utterly convinced that a new, deadly mechanism was about to instantly destroy them. While the Romans ultimately managed to capture Syracuse through internal betrayal and political subterfuge, rather than a successful frontal assault from the sea, they profoundly understood the absolute, undeniable necessity of maritime fortification. As their massive empire aggressively expanded, they continually sought to tame the sea itself through incredibly massive, highly expensive engineering projects. The absolute pinnacle of this effort was the construction of Portus, a massive artificial harbor ordered by the Emperor Claudius just north of Ostia, situated precisely at the mouth of the Tiber River. Recognizing clearly that the shifting, natural coastline could absolutely not support the massive, daily logistical demands of the Roman capital, imperial engineers constructed truly colossal breakwaters and artificial moles extending deep into the Mediterranean waters. These immense, concrete structures, proudly visible on ancient imperial coinage, were the direct Roman equivalent of modern artificial islands, explicitly designed to create a safe, perfectly stationary haven for incoming merchants, while simultaneously projecting undeniable imperial authority deep into the chaotic, unpredictable marine environment. Furthermore, the Romans highly utilized their naval forces not merely for simple transport, but as mobile, heavily armed fortifications. The classis, or formal Roman fleet, never fully enjoyed the immense cultural prestige of the land-based infantry legions, but it was absolutely essential for maintaining the distant, watery borders of the empire. The classis Ravennas, permanently based in the Adriatic, and the classis Missenensis, based near Naples, functioned highly effectively as a floating, heavily armed wall across the Mediterranean, securely maintaining the vital sea lines of communication and ruthlessly deterring piracy. During extensive sieges, Roman commanders were well known to construct actual, physical floating walls, tightly lashing massive ships together and mounting towering, multi-story siege towers directly upon them, effectively turning the fluid ocean into a temporary, heavily fortified landmass from which to assault coastal cities. Later, as the empire faced new threats, they constructed the Litus Saxonicum, or the Saxon Shore, a massive chain of coastal forts featuring incredibly thick stone walls designed to repel barbarian raiders and secure the maritime border of Britain. This relentless, centuries-long drive to solidify the maritime border perfectly mirrors the modern construction of island fortresses in the Persian Gulf. Both are determined attempts to impose the rigid, terrestrial control of the state upon the completely untamable sea. When we analytically strip away the shining veneer of technological progress, the strategic similarities between the ancient and modern worlds become completely undeniable. The mathematical, parabolic trajectory of an ancient catapult stone plunging violently through the wooden deck of a Roman quinquireme is governed by the exact same physical laws of the universe as a modern anti-ship cruise missile striking the steel hull of a commercial oil tanker. Both are essentially ballistic mechanisms designed to forcefully project lethal power from a stationary, heavily fortified position across a fluid, unpredictable medium. Whether it is Archimedes calculating the precise tension of twisted rope in ancient Sicily, or modern engineers calibrating the sophisticated guidance software of a ballistic missile deeply buried in a subterranean bunker beneath Abu Musa, the core strategic impulse is absolutely identical. This repetitive impulse is not merely a byproduct of human culture. It is a fundamental, inescapable biological necessity deeply rooted in evolutionary game theory and behavioral ecology. Across the entire animal kingdom, fierce territorial behavior has evolved independently in countless species, specifically because the aggressive defense of highly resource-rich areas is intrinsically linked to biological survival and eventual reproductive success. Humans, despite our technology, are absolutely no exception to these rules. Evolutionary biologists clearly observe that territorial equilibrium, a temporary state where ownership is unchallenged and violent conflict is successfully avoided, is maintained only when the energetic costs of finding alternative territory are prohibitively high, and when the combatants possess the clear capacity to inflict massive, unacceptable harm upon one another. The Strait of Hormuz tragically encapsulates these strict biological conditions. The incredibly dense hydrocarbon resources constantly flowing through the narrow strait are unparalleled in economic value, and the financial cost of finding alternative logistical routes is utterly devastating to the global system. Therefore, the occupying force on the islands is biologically, economically, and strategically incentivized to adopt a highly aggressive, hawkish posture to furiously defend the territory against all challenges. The relentless fortification of the gate is the ultimate logical expression of this ancient evolutionary drive. A society that actively fails to secure its most vital resource choke points will rapidly find itself outcompeted, starved of crucial energy, and eventually absorbed or destroyed by rival, more aggressive societies. In conclusion, the militarization of the Persian Gulf Islands is not a temporary geopolitical crisis, but a highly predictable human adaptation to a permanent geographic reality. By comparing the concrete bunkers of Abu Musa to the stone walls of Syracuse, and the electronic fog of GPS spoofing to the mechanical terror of the Iron Hand, we recognize that the tools of war constantly evolve, but the underlying environmental and biological imperatives remain utterly unchanged forever.